Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to GreenSong's Changemaker series. This is number 8, the final one of this year. I'm your co-host, Alexian, and Grandmother Elspeth will be along in just a moment. It's my pleasure to continue to stream this last episode from my studio here in Orlando, Florida. But before we begin, as always, I'd like to ask a favor, and that is for you to please share this video. Make change. This is the Changemaker series, and one of the ways you can do that is by sharing this video with friends and family of like mind. So just hit the share button and share it out. That actually works with the algorithm and pushes the video up higher in the results for other people to discover. As always, Anita is standing by in the background, ready to answer your comments. So if you're on YouTube or Facebook, you'll see the video. Down below is the comment section. That's actually a chat room. And when you chat, those chat messages come to us live right here in the studio. And Anita has the power to click on them and share them right here on the screen. So you may see your name flash right across the screen live. It's pretty cool. Also, if you're on YouTube, GreenSong is trying to grow their YouTube subscriber base. So please not only like this video, but hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so that you receive the notifications. I should mention again that there is an auction going on at greensongfestival.com. That's greensongfestival.com. Not only is the auction of Elspeth's and Nybor's artwork happening there, but there's also the opportunity for you to donate. So if you resonate with this energy and this educational material that's being brought to you, please consider donating. Even $5 makes a difference. Okay, so without delay, it is my pleasure to introduce to you, let me get the right screen up here, Elspeth.
Hello, everybody. I'm Grandmother Elspeth, and this is the 8th session in this set of Changemaker, brought to you by GreenSong. Announcements first. Remember the online auction at greensongfestival.com, and definitely remember the donation button that you can contribute to the well-being of our speakers and our musicians. We have to think about the fact that they are shut away from their audience and are bringing you what they can hear. Enjoy it, learn from it, and help it happen. I want to give you a Pete Seeger quote for our very last session. The key issues are those that are close to you, geographically as well as spiritually. If somebody says, I want to change the world, where do I go? My answer is, stay right where you are. Don't run away. Dig in and make changes. And that's where we are at this point. Our speaker today, we have continued to be blessed with knowledgeable and inspiring speakers. Our speaker today is Beth Remmes. She is facilitator for the work that Reconnects, among her many challenging works. She grew up in the traditional ancestral land of the Hoodiness, I'm gonna have trouble pronouncing this, Haudenosaunee people in upstate New York. Her childhood experiences at nature camp and school exposed her to the indigenous wisdom of the Confederacy, the Indian Confederacy, Native American, and led to her future dedication to help create a life-sustaining society. All her life, she has been drawn to deep ecology, indigenous wisdom, environmental and social justice, systems theory, permaculture, sustainability, and earth skills. What a lineup. Beth's workshops and her presentation, Shout with Possibilities. Once again, it gives me great joy to introduce our speaker, Beth Remmes.
Hi, everyone. Many thanks to GreenSong and Grandmother Elspeth for inviting me to be a part of the Changemaker series. I have enjoyed listening to the other speakers and musicians and plan to weave some of their wisdom into this final talk. I'm recording this just after Thanksgiving, so I won't have heard all the speakers at this point. But the ones I have heard, I would like to incorporate because they had a lot of great things to share. My dear friend, Sarah Anders, was scheduled to give this talk. And if you know Sarah, she is like the Energizer bunny with a lot of projects going on dedicated to the healing in this world. However, as can happen, she needed to slow down herself and focus on her own healing. So she asked me to fill in for her. She also knows how much I love talking about the work that reconnects and the great turning. So hopefully you will feel that she left you in good hands. Just to tell you a little bit more about myself, I'm a facilitator for the work that reconnects. I am leader of the Earth Care team at Unity Atlanta and a member of Unity Worldwide Ministries Earth Care team. I am also on the board of directors for Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. So tonight we are going to go to the spiral of the work that reconnects and the 3 stories of our time, and look at how to move from our industrial growth society to a life-sustaining society. So with that, I think, I'm not sure where you're going to be listening to this. If you're in your car, don't close your eyes, but if you're at home, I would just really like to start out by creating a bit of sacred space and bring us into this moment together. So I'm going to do the screen share here, and we are going to move into a bunch of PowerPoints. So hang on one second. Okay. Move this down here. Slideshow from current slide. Okay. All right. So if you feel comfortable in a good space to do this, please take a few deep cleansing breaths as we leave behind the cares of the day and come into this present moment. With each breath, feel the life force circulate through you. Now bring your awareness to your body. Slowly rotate your head, easing the neck and all its nerve centers. Rotate your shoulders, releasing the burdens and the tensions they carry. Now feel your feet firmly planted on the ground, and let us acknowledge and honor the indigenous people of this land, where I am, that is Muskogee Creek and Cherokee Nation, the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. And think of how our roots connect us to the earth and how our branches connect us to each other. May we give thanks that we are here together in cyberspace, and let us embrace our diversity as well as recognize our oneness. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to move into our talk here about the work that reconnects. The work that reconnects was created by Joanna Macy. This is she and I from a workshop in New York State. I don't know, probably about 4 years ago at this point. This work was created in the late 1970s as a response to the nuclear age and disasters such as 3 Mile Island accident. And over the years, thousands of people from within and beyond movements for peace, justice, and a safe environment have participated in these practices. So this is a global movement at this point. In addition to being an activist and root teacher of the work that Reconnects for over 4 decades, Joanna Macy is also a scholar of Buddhism, general systems theory, and deep ecology. And you will feel the roots of her studies coming through in this work. If not today, certainly if you were to ever take a longer in-person workshop with her or other facilitators. And I like to point out that she is now, I think, 91, and she's been doing this work again for over 40 years. So she is really the embodiment of sustainable activism, sustainable change making, which we're talking about today. So this is the spiral of the work. And I'm just going to say, I am going to use slides mostly today because I think it's more interesting than watching me for 45 minutes. And I personally am more of a visual learner. So I'm hoping you find this helpful as I go through this today. So the spiral of the work starts from gratitude. And whether I am doing this workshop like today in about 45 minutes, or whether I'm doing it over the span of a few days, this is always the spiral that we follow. So the first step is gratitude. And like many faith and indigenous traditions, this is where we start. Gratitude can ground us. It brings us into presence. It stimulates our empathy and confidence. And it helps us be more fully available to move into this next part of the spiral, the honoring our pain. And this is just kind of an overview. And then as we get into the work, we are going to be looking at these more closely. So the honoring our pain piece is acknowledging our despair for the world. It's getting real and talking with each other about what's going on and how we feel about it. When Joanna Macy first started this work, it was called From Despair to Empowerment. And it was groundbreaking because at that point, a lot of times our pain for the world was pathologized. You know, you'd go into a doctor's office and you'd say, my heart is breaking over what is happening in our oceans. And many times you might hear back, oh, well, what does that symbolize in your life? What do you think that really means? As if we couldn't really have that capacity to care for something beyond ourselves. And this work what this work does is says, no, not only is that a valid response to the world and what's happening, but it's a necessary response. And just like in our bodies, if we get cut and we are in pain, it sends our immune system and our white blood cells to go to that area. And if you look at this from a systems perspective and you are feeling pain for a certain part of the world, think of that as you being part of the Earth's immune system and going to that place of pain. So this is a really important part of the spiral. And it's something that isn't always talked about, but it really does open up our wellspring of compassion. And it is a strength that we have, that we can do that and care on behalf of other life forms. The third part is seeing with new eyes. So those first two parts, that gratitude and honoring our pain, are really heart opening. It's working with our internal feedback loops. And once we start to open those up, we can kind of move up here a little bit more into the brain and the head, the thinking and the seeing with new and ancient eyes. So this is looking at different perspectives. This can include deep time work, using our moral imagination. It's really a fun part of the spiral that we will get into tonight as well. And then lastly, the going forth. Even if I didn't tell you that this was a spiral of the work that we go through, this going forth piece like almost happens naturally. As you open your system and you start to see these possibilities, it's almost just intuitive that the next step is, okay, what can I do? So we are gonna go into that a little bit, but that's actually what I'm going to hope that you take with you today. I hope that after hearing this lecture and all the other great talks by the people in this series, that something grabs you that you want to take a hold of and you want to go forth and do that in the world. And it's something that you will find joy in, not another something to do to add to your to-do list, because we all have enough of those. Okay. So moving on, we are going to start in gratitude. And here are a few quotes. In times of turmoil and danger, gratitude helps to steady and ground us. It brings us into presence, and our full presence is perhaps the best offering we can make to our world. Sometimes we come into this work, we are a change maker. It's not necessarily from being present and seeing what's happening, although sometimes that is the case. But for a lot of people, it is anger that gets us to this part where we say we have to make a difference. I am so upset about whatever that is. So I want to kind of talk about this too, because that is the flip side, and we can find our ways to get back to the roots of gratitude. So Marianne Williams says, anger is the white sugar of activism. It's a good rush, but it doesn't provide nourishment. And then I also have this quote from Ruby Sales, which this is from an On Being episode, and I would really encourage you to go listen to it at some point. It's really beautiful. But she talks about this too. And she says, I became involved in the Southern Freedom Movement, not merely because I was angry at injustice, but because I love the idea of justice. So it's where you begin your conversation. So most people begin their conversation with, oh, I hate this, but they never talk about what it is they love. And so I think that we have to begin to have a conversation that incorporates a vision of love with a vision of outrage. And I don't see those things as being over and against each other. You can't talk about injustice without talking about suffering. But the reason why I want to have justice is because I love everybody in my heart. And if I didn't have that feeling, that sense, then there would be no struggle. So I know these are a lot of quotes, but I just think it's really interesting to look at both sides of this. And if you are having a hard place getting to gratitude, I'm just going to ask you to notice what it is that is breaking your heart. What is it that is upsetting you? If you're like me, maybe you yell at the radio and the news sometimes. And so what is that? And if you're upset because of you're witnessing an injustice, this is encourage you to peel those layers back and see that, oh, it's because I love justice. So you can apply that to anything that is upsetting you and get to that root, which is gratitude, which is going to be a much more sustainable place to do our work from. If we do our work in the world as change makers from what we love rather than what we're angry at, it is going to be a much more sustainable and enjoyable path for us. So how do we do it though, right? How do we continue to keep gratitude a focal point in our lives? Well, these are a few of my favorite practices and resources. Many people have a gratitude journal. There is also something called a 5-minute journal app on your phone if you like that sort of medium. But it's great because it gives you prompts so you remember what great things happened to you and you can put it in and include pictures. And then just writing thank you notes, whether it's a text or an email or actually mailing a letter. Saying it, make sure you say it to the people, certainly our frontline workers, more than ever, we can say it to them. We can say it to our family members. Feel it, create a joy list and do at least one thing a day. And I'll show you some ideas if you need that in just a minute, but these are things like your favorite songs, just things that you love doing, and make it a priority to incorporate that into your day. And then if your news feed looks anything like my news feed, there's a lot of bad news in it. So I make sure to sign up for these newsletters as well, and also like their pages on Facebook or other social media that you're on, so that you can see some other amazing things going on in the world. Many of these are self-explanatory about finding all the good news. Giraffe Heroes is great. If you need any inspiration, go to giraffe.org. It's all about people who stick their neck out. So if you're looking for inspiration from other change makers, that's a good place to go. Nonviolence news is fantastic. It looks at globally how people are involved in the democratic process or in change making in nonviolent ways, in really creative ways often. There's also the Optimist Daily and Yes Magazine, which I always recommend. Here's a picture of the magazine. This focuses on solutions. This magazine is all about solutions, and I highly, highly recommend this. There's also an online newsletter as well. And then here are some more of those ideas if you need things to put on your joy list. So I got this online. I just did a search for no burnout bingo, but here's some great ideas, just things like going to a bookstore, which you may or may not be able to do right now, but I don't know about you. I have a lot on my shelves that I haven't read yet. So really just taking time, carving out some time in the day to sit in a corner in a nook and read a book, doing some art, doing some crafts, planting something, get your hands on the soil, taking a walk, going to, well, again, we probably can't go to a music show in person, but certainly these sorts of events, like connecting with other people online. All right. So that kind of brings us to the end of gratitude. But again, that's just a really grounding place where we want to resource from as we do our work in the world. So this is the next part of, and the majority of our talk tonight. And this again is a teaching from Joanna Macy and the work that reconnects. It is in her book, Coming Back to Life, right here. You can also find it on the Work That Reconnects website, but I really love this teaching. So this is called the 3 stories of our time. And we really get to decide, while you're listening to this, decide where you want to put your energy, and maybe even look at where you think most of your energy is currently going. So these are 3 stories that we're looking at, and they are all true to some extent. And again, we get to decide where we want to put our energy. So the first story is a business as usual story. And this is the one told by mainstream media and corporations. And I don't mean mainstream media in the way that it's currently been maligned in our culture, but I just mean it's the dominant narrative. This is a story that we hear most often. And the plot is about getting ahead in the industrial growth society. So I'm just going to go through some of these things that we probably hear in this story. Extreme weather is cyclical and temporary. Go shopping. I don't know if any of you remember after 9/11, Ari Fleischer came on and talked about how we can repair our society, how we can help each other. And the advice was to go shopping. Now, I don't know about you, but I thought that was insane. But that's a very real response when people are wanting to know what to do to help our economy or help each other. Like, the answer is somehow in shopping. Our current model of extract it and use it and throw it away, like that it works on a linear system. The Story of Stuff has a really great video about this and just how unnatural it is when nature works in cycles and doesn't have in a way, everything becomes compost and part of new life. It really forces us to look at, is this the model that we should be using, like this extraction model? The idea of buy now, pay later. And we do this in our personal life, and we are certainly doing this in our ecological lives. We do not need to change our energy or consumption habits. This is the American way of life. I am not going to do anything to change it. Despite the fact that it would take, about 4 or 5 Earths if everyone lived like we did. But there is a mindset that, no, that I somehow deserve to live like this. In this story, businesses externalize costs, and regulations are bad for business. So when I say externalize costs, it's really interesting to look at. I'm not an economist, so they could probably explain this better, but the idea that many corporations only use like a certain part of the balance sheet. Let's say you're a manufacturer and you're like trying to figure out how to dispose of maybe some chemicals that you have. Well, sometimes EPA pays attention and has regulations, but for decades, if not longer, and even more recently when things have been relaxed, many businesses push those off into the air or in the water, which ends up then making our civilians sick. And then we go to the hospital, and then all those costs of their pollution end up on us or end up on our healthcare system. So that's just kind of one little example, but it's a way that businesses don't really take into account the full implications for all that they do. They're really just looking at a little part of the balance sheet. The idea of market-based solutions. We're going to let the market figure it out. The market's going to tell us, whether it works or whether it doesn't, rather than maybe looking at what's happening with overall human and planetary health. The idea that all businesses, that we need to have unlimited growth, despite the fact that the earth is finite and there are finite resources, but somehow we are expecting businesses to always grow and grow and grow. And part of that is that nature is seen as a commodity. And that we measure success by things like the GDP or stock market, again, instead of looking at overall health of people and planet. So again, in this story, it's profits above all else. And so whether it was the cotton gin or the internet, and the goal of most businesses in this era is maximizing profits. And when you maximize one aspect of a system over everything else, then it all becomes imbalanced. Like if you look at what would happen in our body if something just started to take over and create that imbalance, we call that cancer, right? And that is what this mindset of just looking at profits has in many ways done to our society, as we're going to look at the next story. So again, all these stories are happening and they're all true, and we get to decide where to put most of our energy. And now some of our energy might have to be in business as usual story. Like I get in my car and I drive to work, and some of those things like we can't necessarily totally get out of, but we can say, all right, I'm going to have some time spent in this, but there are other places to put my energy. Okay, so that next story. Actually, before I get to that, I do just want to say, when I did this in a workshop once, someone said, oh, I already see enough the news. Like, why do we have to look at this? Why do we care? Why do I need to talk about this business as usual story? And that was a really good question. And it kind of forced me to think, like, why is this part of the teaching? And I came up with a few reasons. Number one, I think it makes us feel less alone when we hear other people question these assumptions. So like when I heard other people say nature as a commodity, or when I saw how that linear system of extracting, using and throwing out doesn't work, and other people thought that it didn't work and cared about it, and made me feel less alone. And even other like assumptions like, oh, we all need to have the perfect lawn. We have to use pesticides to make our grass perfect. And that we flush water that you can drink. I mean, these are like littler things, but just kind of crazy to me. And when I'm with other people who feel similarly, it really does make me feel like I have community. The second one, when we know the language and theme of the dominant story, it helps us understand the underlying problems and then craft solutions that will appeal to the stakeholders. So for example, I think Citizens Climate Lobby does a really good job of this. They know that the dominant story loves to hear things like market-based solutions. And so part of when they work across the aisles to have a price on carbon, they use that terminology, and they use it like, oh, this will help the economy. They use that language to help be that bridge. And then lastly, and this is particularly important over the holidays, I think, when we're with family, when we encounter someone who is firmly tied to the story, instead of getting upset, we can create a space to step back and say, oh, this person is giving their energy to business as usual. And for me, kind of like, when you're in meditation and you have a little bit of, it creates a little bit of space before your reaction. That's what this story does. When I hear someone saying, oh, climate change, just weather is cyclical and it's temporary. And, that's not really a thing. Before I just blurt out and react, I can just take a breath and have some compassion to think that this person is really only hearing that one dominant narrative. And they believe that this is the American way of life and they are afraid of changing. So again, it gives me a little more space. It doesn't mean that I won't eventually talk to them about climate change, but it helps me be a little less reactive. Okay. So the next story, again, we can decide where to put our energy. And sometimes a lot of it goes here. This is a story of the Great Unraveling. And this is backed by evidence of the collapse of environmental, social, and economic systems. And this story is certainly not new to us right now. Although it is a convergence of many crises, this story has been going on for centuries, and it's pervasive in much of the world, especially in industrial growth societies. So again, this is right around Thanksgiving time. I can't help but think of the indigenous people here when, with the arrival and the colonization, that was absolutely an unraveling. 400 years ago, when people were taken from their homes in Africa and enslaved here, that was certainly unraveling. So again, this has been happening for centuries, but right now there is a convergence of crises that is really affecting everyone. Okay, so here we go. And these are just some of them. Economic. I know you can all read, so I maybe won't read all of them out, but just to say, like, we're having a lot of issues here with wealth inequality and poverty, automation, outsourcing. We really don't have a safety net. That buy now, pay later mindset that I mentioned earlier, we are seeing that here. We have staggering amounts of personal debt and ecological debt. And again, this is from that mindset of putting profits over people and planet. And where that shows here, like this is our little Venn diagram where it's overlapping, because we think profits are so important, we've done things in the economy like, oh, we're going to outsource and we're going to automate jobs. And so we're saying that because that's going to give the most profits, but we're really not thinking of how that impacts people. From the environmental side, climate change and pollution, Fuzz Sanderson mentioned the mass extinctions. And yes, it is, many scientists agree that we are going through a sixth mass extinction right now. We're having extreme weather, factory farms and processed packaged foods. And Grandmother Deborah spoke about this a bit, and the farms as far as like the soil and the pesticides and how that's breaking down our living systems. And if you look into health, and that's very connected, like if we have all these GMOs and pesticides on our wheat and we're in breads, where many people are now having gluten sensitivities, which end up creating havoc in our system. So again, we can kind of start to see how some of these things are connected. And certainly COVID has exposed this fault line as well. People who live in areas that are most polluted and most toxic, the most toxic air, generally have more higher rates of asthma and are really suffering more because of COVID. The ideas of, well, I just say, like, it's really interesting, I have in here substance abuse. The substance abuse right now that we've been talking about is painkillers. People are in pain. It's not a coincidence that all these things are happening and one of the substances is being most abused is painkillers. I think that's really telling of where people are right now. Socially, certainly very, very polarized, loss of connection, education disparities, and education being so unaffordable right now for many people. And then we've really seen, if any of us had thought we are a post-racist society, I think these last few years have showed us that's not the case. And certainly in looking at mass incarceration and who is most often behind bars, we've had a rise in hate crimes, militarization of police, and police brutality, and racial profiling. So, take a breath on that, right? That's a lot. And I think I personally do spend a lot of my time here, more than I'd really like to in the story. I mean, you can't really turn on the news without being in the story. And I think this is a really good, simple way to break it down and why this is happening. The Dalai Lama said, people were created to be loved. Things were created to be used. The reason why the world is in chaos is because things are being loved and people are being used. That's a really simple yet profound way to explain this chaos. Like, what are we prioritizing? It's showing that business as usual prioritizing profits over everything else is leading to this breakdown. But we're not going to stay in that story. There's 3 stories, remember? And in permaculture, there is a principle that is known as the problem is the solution. And I like to think of that when I look at this chart here. So I have been involved in the environmental movement for a long time, and I've seen a lot of the messaging. A lot of times it has to do with endangered species or polar bears, on an iceberg, and trees being cut down, which honestly all breaks my heart, absolutely. However, if that is the only message coming out in the environmental field, we have left a lot of people out. So imagine you're a frontline community who has drinking water that you can't drink. Imagine that you have so much pollution in the air that you can't even see as far as you should. It's yellow in the sky, and your child has breathing problems. Now that we're starting to see the impact of these things, the people in the environmental side can start to have more of an understanding in a systems way of all that impacts. And we can start to make other connections and build coalitions. So just a few examples, and across the board, we can do this. So again, the problem is the solution, right? So I'm gonna use this arrow here. So if I'm really concerned about climate change, I'm going to look at some of these areas and say, okay, well, who could be some partners for me? I might say over here in the economy, I know that mass transit could really help from an environmental standpoint, removing toxins from the air. And I also know, because we have such serious economic issues, that we really need some local jobs where we could have job training and start to build some light rail. And I could maybe work with people who are working with people currently coming out of our incarceration system who need job training. So I could find some partners here to help with the movement for more transportation, light rail, where I live. So this is just kind of one example. Food is another big place. I could, healthcare workers and are seeing these chronic diseases could start working with local farms, organic farms, and making sure that people have access to healthy food, that we're not in, some people call it food desert, some people call it food apartheid, that it's more deliberate that certain areas don't have healthy food. So working on solving some of those problems. So there's just a few ideas, but I do think because society is breaking down in so many ways, there are a lot of opportunities for partnerships where maybe they wouldn't have existed before. Okay. And I just saw this quote today by Pope Francis. He wrote an article called "A Crisis Reveals What Is in Our Hearts," and I thought it was so kind of perfect for what we're talking about. My screen share is over this a little bit, so you will have to read it. But the idea that where humankind has to act is precisely there in the threat itself. That's where the door opens. And that's just what we're saying here. We are saying that our backs are against the wall, and this is maybe where our most creative solutions are going to come, because we really are pressed to do it. He wrote, "This is a moment to dream big, to rethink our priorities, what we value, what we want, what we seek, and to commit to act in our daily life on what we have dreamed of. To come out of this crisis better, we have to recover the knowledge that we as a people have a shared destination. This pandemic has reminded us that no one is saved alone. What ties us to one another is what we commonly call solidarity. Solidarity is more than acts of generosity, as important as those are. It is the call to embrace the reality that we are bound by bonds of reciprocity. On the solid foundation, we can build a better, different human future." And I know some of our other speakers particularly Snow Bear, talked about the importance of community, and that's what this is getting to. Like, how do we go forth? How do we do this? So this is where it starts to get really interesting. And Joanna Macy would call this the greatest adventure of our time, the Great Turning. So the Great Turning does not give the Great Unraveling the last word. And as we can see from business as usual, what that's causing, it's hard to imagine that is going to last for much longer. And who knows what that is, but it's hard to see that we can continue going about business as usual. So if we choose this story, we will start to see some really incredible possibilities. And if you think that this is impossible, that there's no way that we can transition from an industrial growth society to a life-sustaining society, it's good to remember where we are in context of other revolutions. So there is the agricultural revolution, which took thousands of years. And then the industrial growth society, which really only took generations from the late 1700s to present. And some people call what we are in right now the third industrial revolution, or the digital revolution, information age. And I just looked at my phone when we get to this part, because when I was in college, I didn't even have email. Like, it did not exist. And now I can pick up my phone and I can FaceTime my friend in France. I mean, it's truly amazing what we can do when we put our minds to it. These revolutions, up till this point, have the mindset of growth at all costs and profits over people and planet, as we've been talking about. But what if we started to change that value system and move to a life-sustaining society? So how do we do that? So there are 3 dimensions of the Great Turning, and you will notice that this is not a linear system. These are all mutually reinforcing, and they are all important, and we can cycle from one to the other and back and forth. So the first one is holding actions. And these are the actions that, think of your hands up, like just stop holding it. You're holding back the destruction. And this is what we commonly think of when we think of activism. These include all the political, legislative, and legal work required to reduce the destruction, as well as direct action like blockades, boycotts, civil disobedience, and other forms of refusal. The next one, creation of life-sustaining systems and practices. I love this quote by R. Buckminster Fuller. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And then the third dimension, the shift in consciousness, perceptions, and values. These structural alternatives cannot take root and survive without deeply ingrained values to sustain them. They require a profound shift in our perception of reality. And that shift is happening now, both as a cognitive revolution and spiritual awakening. Now we're going to go into these in a little more detail. And what I really love about this is it opens up the ways that we can be change makers, the ways where we can find our way into this work. So I would imagine as you're going through this, or just start to notice where you are feeling pulled. I hope that this opens up some more possibilities for you. So again, these are the holding actions, or maybe things that we think of as resistance. So the showing up part, these are the protests and the marches and the boycotts and strikes, sit-ins, town halls, even just going to community meetings, local school board meetings. It's so important. Speaking up, phone calls. I don't know about you, but I have my representatives on speed dial. Letters to the editor, petitions, ResistBot. That's like a text, and you can have your letter faxed directly to your representatives. Whistleblowing, journalism would fall under here, and just speaking our own truth, kind of like what I said about, being around people who don't believe in climate change. It's good to not get reactive, but we still do need to find ways that we can talk about it. Organizing. lawsuits, elections, campaigning, divestment. And then Gene Sharp has 198 methods of nonviolent action. So if you're looking for some more creative ideas, I really recommend that resource. The divestment movement is really big and impactful. A number of colleges have been divesting from pipelines, fossil fuels, and banks also around the world. That's really powerful. Personally, I have switched to community banking, and when I told Bank of America why, because I didn't like that they supported the pipelines, they said, "Oh, I've never heard that reason before," which I thought was too bad. I wish more people had said that to them as they closed their accounts, but maybe one day. So all these holding actions save lives, ecosystems, species, and cultures. It is heroic work. It can also be tiring and filled with defeats. So don't feel guilty if you need to take a break. There are many other ways to participate in the great turning. So the next system. These are new systems and practices. And I would add new and remembered systems and practices, because many of these come out of Indigenous traditions who've been doing this for a long time and have known about our connection and relationship and the systems thinking of the land. And so again, this is not new to them, just maybe new to some of us. So a better way to say this would be new and remembered systems and practices. So some of the things on here are renewable energy. There's a lot in the food movement, community supported agriculture, slow food movement, rather than opposed to the fast food movement in our business as usual. Organic farming. I've heard a few people, Grandma Elspeth talked about permaculture, and I think some of the other speakers as well. I think Snow Bear did on their farm out in St. Croix. The idea of vertical farming, urban gardening, edible landscapes. Again, things like universal design. How can we make this inclusive and accessible to everyone? LEED, that has, again, like if you're building homes, there's LEED certifications about saving leadership and environmental energy design. So it's looking at using some of those renewable energy systems, using water catchment, water saving systems, looking at the whole building and saying, how can we save resources? And I will say in Atlanta too, we have the Candida building, which is not only LEED design, but it actually is looking for ways to give back energy, to create more energy than it uses and give back to the system. So that's a really incredible thing to have here in Atlanta to look at that. The tiny house movement, really looking to downscale, really asking how much do we actually need. Green buildings, co-ops, bike lanes, biomimicry, which I think is fascinating. That's using nature. Let's see, actually I have a book here to show you. This is a new one out. It's called Seed and Spark, using nature as a model to reimagine how we live. So really taking that wisdom from nature that has been around for, 3.8 billion years, and thinking, maybe we have something to learn from that if we mimic some of those lessons. Cradle to cradle design, again, designing with that end in mind. How, instead of using that extraction model, how do we mimic more of a natural system to think about what it looks like at the end and not just throw it away, but maybe reuse it somehow. Herbalism, looking at end-of-life green burials, restorative justice, transition towns, Bitcoin and time banks, alternative currencies and local currencies, local living economies and resilience. Again, I think that's something that Snow Bear spoke about, like how do we build resilience within a community? And he had mentioned also to sharing programs like tool shares, like why does everyone in a community need the same tools? Like maybe there could be a bank for some of that. Repair cafes, trying to change that mindset of throwing it out. Let's just maybe try to fix things. And there's so many here. This is just a handful. You could probably do this for hours, but I just think this is so exciting because all these things are already happening. They are happening somewhere. So you don't need to go out and create this. These are happening. Even just how we deliver information, the fact that we can do this online, that you can get on YouTube and watch this or watch a TED Talk. The ways where we are already bucking the system of profits first and looking at things like fair trade and fair for life, and how do we compensate people? How do we have a living wage? Sociocracy, I think that I read about that in Yes Magazine. It's a dynamic circle of governance where it's not the top-down approach. It's really more of a consensus model. Looking at zero waste. I mentioned Citizens Climate Lobby earlier. B corporations, that's really fascinating. Again, if you are interested in economy and business, I am not saying that we need to move to communism or socialism per se, but there's a lot that can be approved in our capitalist system. And B corporation is a really great model for that. It is looking at, the B stands for benefit. So rather than being beholden to shareholders, when corporations get started, they can say, no, we are also considering people and planet as much as profit, so that they then do not have to just look at the margins as the only part of their decision making. They can look at the whole system. And green investing, you can invest in those companies and other companies that are doing good. And then donut economics, which I think is fascinating. That's a TED Talk. I think I have a slide here about that. Oh yeah, here it is. It's by Kate Rayworth. And it's asking that question. What if the economics didn't start with money, but with human well-being? And just an idea of some of the things we're looking at, like, this is where we want to live. We want to live in this space. We don't want to live in overshoot. And what happens when we can live within our carrying capacity? Okay, and then the third part of this dimension of the great turning is a shift in consciousness, perceptions, and values. I think it was Byron Ballard talked about this a little bit, the ego and the eco, that we are all part of this system. We are moving from this mindset where we have dominion over and top down and, the ones in control, to really seeing our interconnectedness and where we are in the grand scheme of things. I think this GreenSong is a fantastic example of this. I think Grandmother Elspeth had this inspiration from her, from the music of Pete Seeger and her relationship with him. I think at one point she quoted, he said, "I'm just sowing the seeds." And that's often what music and arts do for us. They allow us to access part of ourselves and creativity and inspiration that maybe we couldn't get to another way. And the Permaculture Action Network is a good example of like marrying the two. So a lot of times they'll take, they go from like a music or cultural event, and from there they gather the people there and said, okay, now let's get our hands dirty. Let's go out and do a day of permaculture in a nearby community garden. So that's a way of how to bring these things together. I thought that Standing Rock a few years ago was a really beautiful embodiment of the shift in consciousness, perceptions, and values. We saw how often I'm sure they always did. We maybe didn't always see it, but how it was always started in prayer. The day was always started in prayer, giving thanks in that from that place of gratitude. And then part of that was the veterans, the forgiveness ceremony. I kind of mentioned restorative justice earlier, but that's a beautiful example of that. How do we make repair? How do we come full circle? Things like art, I mentioned music already, but like, for example, plastic. I don't know if you've seen any of those exhibits where all the plastic from ocean is made into something. So it's causing us to look. We are not turning away from our pain. It's causing us to look at the pain and look at what's happening in a way that, again, might inspire a reaction or some creativity. I think the Black Lives Matter movement has been a huge shift, certainly for me, because I think a number of years ago when I first heard that, I was like, of course Black Lives Matter. Why would they think they didn't matter? And then I started to learn about systemic oppression and racism and the history of it. And I started to understand what is still happening and why, and just really educate myself on what has been happening in our society. And I think certainly this ends up in holding actions as well, as we've seen from the marches and protests earlier this year. But it falls here because I think we can all do a better job at learning our history and learning how to make repair. LGBTQ rights also. Again, that's a shift. You know, in my lifetime, I'm so grateful that people have the right to marry who want to marry, and we need to protect that. That's not a given, but just to see that how far that shift has come in my lifetime is encouraging, and it reminds me that we can do these things. I'm not sure if it's on this list, but along with rights, there's like the rights of nature movement, where some countries and towns have given water or mountains special rights. So it's not just like up to an EPA regulation, but it's saying, no, this is protected. There are rights of nature. And that's a really, could be a really impactful way forward and changing the dialogue and values and what happens to these natural resources. Mental health awareness and integrative holistic medicine, how important that is, and understanding wellness. Mindfulness, that movement, I think, has really, again, helped us maybe look at that pain, help us ground in gratitude, and which, you know, helped us see what's really going on. So Bhutan has the gross national happiness, unlike the GDP as a measurement of success. They look at happiness. How are people doing? Maybe this is how we should you know, again, measure success. The Charter for Compassion. Excuse me. The tiny house movement I put here too, because whereas it's great as buildings and making sustainable living, it's also a value system. I remember when McMansions were the thing that everyone wanted. Now it's tiny houses are the rage, which is fantastic. The Center for a New American Dream, which I think just changed its name, they've been around for a long time and are changing their focus, but it's really just having us question commercialism and consumerism. And I'm doing this actually on Black Friday, and I'm really glad to be here instead of shopping somewhere. I read that quote by Pope Francis earlier, but he also wrote the encyclical, which was really a major shift from this ego to eco, where it's not man has dominion, but no, we are all connected and we have a responsibility to this planet and to each other. And it's great to see that also happening in interfaith communities. Interfaith Power and Light is a great organization. Again, yoga and meditation. Heart Math Institute with Global Coherence Institute. That's fascinating. It touches on quantum physics and systems theory and starting to see how these things like meditation and energy in the world connect and how we can heal doing that. And the reason these things are important and why I'm mentioning them is if you don't feel like either physical limitations or it's just not calling to you to go to a protest in person, that's fine. Maybe you're more of a person who loves meditation and can offer that. So what I really love about this teaching is, again, it's finding a path for everyone who wants to be involved. And I'll just finish up with a few, the resurgence of the shamanic traditions and vision quests. We have to be really careful of not appropriating that and being in integrity with that, but just at least recognizing that we have a lot to learn from those cultures if they care to share it with us. A subtle and sacred activism, connecting spiritual awareness with collective concerns. And I think Pachamama Alliance does a great job bringing these two things together. And they also have a Changemaker series that if you haven't took it, it's really incredible. So I'm going to go to this page. So we're not going to, this is kind of what probably I think most of the things on here I already talked about. But again, just putting this here all together because I want to overwhelm you. I want you to see all these words and be like, oh my gosh, that's so much. Because yes, it is so much. This is all happening. It is all happening, and we can find out where we want to plug into it. Hopefully something that I said here today is something you're already doing, or something that maybe piqued your interest and thought, oh, I want to find out more about that. I may be feeling called to move in that direction. And again, just reinforcing that it's not linear, that these things are meant to be working together, and we can go from one to the other and back and forth. And if you do feel maybe particularly called to think more things like meditation, think of how you can offer that as a restorative process for people who are involved in the high burnout activities like the holding actions. Maybe that's a great group of people who you could offer your wisdom to. Byron Ballard mentioned this book, Sacred Instructions, and I just want to say it again too, because it really is a beautiful book. And one thing I really loved, and this was her 80-10-10 rule. And she writes, we invest 10% of our energy looking at what needs to be changed, another 10% holding back the tide of harm that has been created by our previous investments, and the final 80% creating a reality that offers compassion, safety, equality, justice, and sustainability for all life. So think about those stories that we talked about, that business as usual story, the story of the great unraveling, and the story of the great turning. And just kind of think for a moment where you are putting most of your energy. Are you doing 10-10-80? You know, what would that feel like if you did? What would that feel like if maybe you did 10% business as usual because you have to? And maybe you did 10% of the great unraveling story because we want to be informed. We want to know what's happening. And then we put 80% into this shift from an industrial growth society to a life-sustaining society. How would that feel? I don't know about you, but I feel so enlivened even just talking about this. And I guess I should relate to the spiral too, if it wasn't obvious, that great unraveling, like that is our pain piece, you know, and looking at that to some extent is really important because we have to know where we can then respond. But this part, I hope that you saw something differently. I hope that you saw this with new eyes. I hope this taught you some possibilities that maybe you weren't even aware of, or reinforced some that you've already been doing and can see what you are doing now as part of this great turning. And I love this quote by Howard Thurman. He says, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who can come alive. I really love that. And then I just want to end with this quote by Howard Thurman, and I'll just tell you a little bit, I guess, how to reach me, should you ever need to. Revolutionary change does not come as one cataclysmic moment. Beware of such moments, but as an endless succession of surprises, moving zigzag toward a more decent society. We don't have to engage in grand heroic actions to participate in the process of change. Small acts, when multiplied by millions of people, can transform the world. Even when we don't win, there is fun and fulfillment in the fact that we have been involved with other good people in something worthwhile. We need hope. And I think this touches upon the message that I've heard from other speakers, and I know the goal of GreenSong is to come together in community. We cannot do this work alone. And also, this emphasizes something that Joanna Macy talks about a lot, is that I can't guarantee you that if we all put in 80% into the great turning that it's going to happen. No one knows what it holds. But like, as Howard Zinn says, there is fulfillment that we have been involved, and it's fun and it's great being with people who care about the things we care about. And so to have a little bit of non-attachment to the result, which will help you not get discouraged too. If you're involved in a holding action that doesn't work, you know, it can be discouraging, right? But if we are committing to being part of this life-sustaining society, even if we can't guarantee our success, knowing that we are moving in that direction with people that we love, for something that we love and are grateful for, it is so rewarding. And that knife edges of uncertainty, as Joanna Macy calls it, that really helps open us up to all the possibilities and creativity. And again, kind of like what the Pope had said too, if our back is against the wall, like these times of danger is the times when we realize we have the capacity to respond. And I think that's really what being a change maker is about, being brave enough to look at the pain and figuring out where you can respond. So this is me. I have been doing a lot of workshops on Zoom lately, but hopefully we'll be doing them again in person one day, and they're very fun and interactive. If you find my website and you go to the inspiration tab, I have a ton of things on Pinterest because I love pictures. So there's a lot of books there and resources, and I even have a tab called The Great Turning. So when I find something already happening, I can put it there as evidence that it is taking place. So thank you so much for joining me today, for asking me to be a part of this. I'm truly honored to be part of this series and in this community, and I hope to be able to meet you all in person one day. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. We have brought about life changes, I'm sure. Let them come about in earth changes. For a number of years, this young man came to my booth at Starwood and would play his violin. Little did I know where he was headed. He is the world's premier visionary violinist. Dixon's life mission is to inspire people, and he has done so across North America. Dixon walked away from a distinguished music career to follow his dream full time, and he invented a whole new music genre. Now Dixon improvises upstring electric violin with a looping system that he developed to create an all of one-man symphony, guided by his remarkable personal story of life transformations. Dixon is a friend, as all of our musicians have been. I have been blessed with music friends that help shift perspective. Find out now about Dixon and his violin.
For those of you that I'm just meeting for the first time, this is different, and this is live. First of all, everything you're about to hear is live. There's nothing pre-recorded. There are no tracks, there are no samples, there are no MP3s. I'm not clicking play on anything that was pre-recorded. Every sound you hear is coming from this violin. I'm just playing with the waveform as it comes through. And I don't have a plan. I don't have a set list. I'm not just playing songs. What I have is an intention. And my intention is to share my heart with you, is to share my soul with you, it's to get out of my head, to get out of my own way, and just let something through. I'm going to start with what I call a song that doesn't exist yet. You've never heard this before. I've never heard this before. We're going to create it together right now. Thank you so much. Hey, it's working. I'm so excited about this. Thank you so much for joining me. And for those of you that I'm just meeting for the first time, and by the way, that includes people online because we're also reaching out through the ether webs too in this. I'm enjoying this more than I think you know, because I didn't always do this. Like, my life has taken a dramatic shift over the last 10 years. Because I used to I didn't do this. Like, I did technology. My main thing in life was technology. I had a very serious career. I'm a geek, by the full disclosure, I'm a geek. And I went to school, college and grad school for computer science. And I went into a successful technology career in Michigan. for 15 years. That was my main thing. If you asked me, what is it you do? Well, I'm a technology leader. That's what I do. I specialize in multidimensional data visualization. Geek. When I say geek, I really mean it. And what was happening is I was playing classical music as a hobby, something I started when I was 10 years old. So I've been playing the violin actually for quite a long time, but for 25 years, it was classical, and it was very rigid, and it was there's rules. There's rules for classical violin. You're not supposed to do, well, basically what I'm doing now. But what happened was I had a life change, and for me, the first spark, the first real shift in my awareness came when I went to a festival. I went to a festival in 2005 that changed my life, and for me, it was mainly because I was around people that were actually living. I found myself surrounded by people that were emoting, and they were being, and they were feeling, and they were expressing, and they were just like out there, and I was never out there. I realized I was looking at them like, you can do that? You're allowed to do that? Because I never put it out there. I was always in my head. I was always in my headspace. I thought my way through life, and I was good at it, and I had no idea that there was all this stuff going on in my heart because I ignored it or I suppressed it. Like, that was my thing. I think I was afraid. I'm sure I was afraid of expressing. Like, my brother was the one that was always expressing, and he would get into trouble. And so I think I figured if I didn't express myself, if I just kept closed in and small, then I wouldn't get into trouble, which is, I suppose, true, but it also means I wasn't living. And when I saw that it was possible to actually put it out there, to put yourself out there, your real feelings and emotions, and that it's okay and it can feel good, I was like, maybe I should try that. So I started experimenting. I started to do this in lots of ways, including musically. So for the first time in my life, after playing the violin for 25 years, I started to improvise, which terrified me because you don't know what you're going to play. How do you know? Like, there's no, I always had the notes written down. I had the rules. I had the steps. The path in life was clear. It was a safety net for me, is to have the notes written in front of me. And to take those away, it was terrifying, because what if I make a mistake? What if I screw up? Because in the classical world, that's the worst thing that can happen. You're judged very strictly on how perfect you are. You're numbered, by the way. I was in an orchestra. There were 80 of us. First chair, second chair, third chair. My first chair is the most perfect. The second chair is not as perfect. And oh gosh, if I'm not those, no, I'm way down. What? I must be a horrible person. Like, that was the energetic environment I was in. It's a horrible energetic environment, right? And now I've realized, no, it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to make mistakes. And I still make mistakes all the time, but I'm much more gentle on myself. I'm like, okay, it's okay. It's, it's improv. You're gonna screw up. You're gonna go in a different direction that you didn't expect. It's okay. And I encourage you to, like, look at your own life and say to yourself, are you taking chances? Like, are you allowing yourself to make mistakes? Like, whatever it is you're trying to do in the world, are you allowing yourself to stretch, to get out of your comfort zone, to go someplace new? And if you screw up, that's okay. Try it again, try it again, try it again. And what's cool is, outside of that comfort zone is where the magic happens. And so I've been delighting in, like, seeing where this goes. And hey, let's do another one. Let's see where this goes. Dixon, you can't make those sounds on a violin. That's impossible. Dixon, you're not supposed to hold the violin that way. You're certainly not supposed to bend it over the strings of the bow. Dixon, you're not supposed to. You can't be a band with just one violin, Dixon. You can't do this for a living. You can't. Like I was told you can't so many times. And what's worse is sometimes I would tell myself that. Well, I could never do that. Right? By the way, violinists are really bad about comparing ourselves to others. Right? Remember, we were ranked. And so I was always looking at the other violinists going, wow, I can't do what they do. Right? And now I'm like, cool, they're doing something I can't. That's awesome. Like, rock on. Like, it doesn't take away from me when somebody else is doing something amazing. And I used to do that all the time. I would just compare myself. No, focus on you. Focus on you. And it's really slippery today, especially like on my phone. It's so easy to scroll through and see photos and videos of people doing amazing things and go, that's not me, that's not me. No, it's not you. That's cool. Like, do your thing. What's your thing? Focus on your thing. Right? Are you waiting for somebody else to change your life? Don't do it. I tried it, don't work. But here's what's cool. You can change your life. You are at the steering wheel of your life and you can steer it wherever you want to go. It's amazing. You have the power of choice, right? You have infinite power in you. Like we are such potential embodied, right? We are like, I like the idea that we don't have souls. We are souls. We are soul beings. Like we are magically amazing. Like science can't describe consciousness or the soul at all. That's how cool we are, right? So we have that potential, and it's really easy to get stuck in the day-to-day stuff. I do it regularly. I get stuck. I'm scrolling through my screen, right? Still, what? No. Remember who you are, and remember why you're here, right? And do it. Do it. Do it. I believe in you. Dixon, you can't do that. I love you guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I so appreciate you. I'm going to play one more song, but I want to say thank you so much. And remember, I hope you've heard something you thought might be impossible before. The point is not that I'm doing something impossible. The point is you can do something impossible. Right now, there are tough things going on the planet. And right now is the best time for you to step into your power. The world needs you right now. Needs you. It's a great time. It's an opportunity. Sometimes a kick in the butt from the universe is just what I needed. But we're getting our butts kicked right now. So it's an awesome time for you to step into your power. What does the world need right now from you? From you is my challenge to you.
Thank you, Dixon. Good to see you again, and I'm always proud of you. Let us use his music as the rest of them to inspire ourselves. Before I close this session, I'd like to talk a little bit about the challenges that we are facing. These challenges lying ahead of us, whether they be related to the electoral policies, the climate catastrophe, economic insecurity, or the fundamental right of people to exist free from violence, will need to be met. We must recognize the personal, social, and environmental toll of fighting for the changes. I really wish we could find another language than the language of war for what we're doing, because if there is a fight, it's more to recognize our own power and act upon it, less to challenging others and trying to make them be like you. There's room for diversity, and we need to welcome it. Humans are resilient. Community power can create systemic change. Support networks can spring up from even the most dire situations. People have been systematically oppressed for centuries. They can continue to rise, demand justice, and make real progress. A broad diversity of solutions can emerge when everyone is invited to the table. When we listen to the original stewards of this land, and when we engage with people who are different from ourselves. Several sessions back, we talked about this. It's extremely important to be able to speak with people who do not agree with you. We've got to find common ground to come out of this at any time, under any circumstances. Your voice is still needed. The work you're already doing to make the world more just, equitable, and sustainable must continue. Your willingness to grow, to learn, to connect with and support your fellow human beings. That will always be essential. The planet will still need your care and your restoration. Black lives will still matter. Indigenous people will still have rights. Immigrants will still be welcomed. And everyone in this country will still be entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The past 4 years have reminded us that we need to protect and expand those rights if we want to keep them at all. Remember, whatever happens, you are a part of it, and you are needed. Your energy is needed. Your interest is needed. We are the change makers. We are the people we've been waiting for. We came to incarnate at this time and in this place because it's our job to fix it. I'd like to close with a prayer as we started. Blessed Creator, as we come to the end of our time together, we thank you for what has been accomplished here in the series. May the matters discussed serve as a catalyst to move us forward and to cause us to advance and see growth in all areas of our lives. Thank you for the ideas that you spoke life into and for the courage of each voice that stood to be heard. In each one of us lies a puzzle piece, one by one, as we stand and speak and work. We see our individual pieces moving into place. We continue to strive for divine will, piece by piece, until we are called home. Bless our work and our time. Guide our steps and our progress. Grant us the power of divine spirit to work together, because it is impossible to see past our human stubbornness without heart-centeredness. Bless us, Creator, we leave here today to take your passion with us, fan its flame at your heart, and inspire our best contributions. Remind us always of your love as we see our plans unfold and accomplish the work we set here. So mote it be. Remember, you are a change maker.
As I went walking the ribbon of highway, saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. Sing it out now. This land was made for you and me. Well, I roamed and I rambled, followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts, while all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. Everybody, this land is your love. To New York Island, from the red forest to the western water. This land was made for you and me. Now, some of you are singing just beautiful, but we need a little harmony. All the high tenors and all the basses and the contramezzo sopranos. Everybody got to get in on this. I mean, everybody. If there's anybody who's not singing, oh, people say, who are you? Woody wrote a lot of verses that did not get in the school songbooks. Here's one of them. In the squares of the city, by the shadow of the steeple, by the welfare office, I saw my people as they stood there hungry. I stood there.
Bodu blib, bobu gip, bodwa da, du, da, dwa, ma.